Welcome to this week's Concurrency Beer 30. I'm Nathan Loznosky, Concurrency's Chief Technology Officer, and this week I have Damon Sanchez. Damon is an architect with our UX practice, and we're here to talk a little bit about UX versus CX. But first, I want to know about your beer.
I am drinking a Leinenkugel's Oktoberfest. We're at the end of September. This seems fitting for the fall. So
that does seem fitting.
And it's very good. Although I poured it and it has a little bit of foam at the top, it should be fine.
That's a moderate amount of foam. That's not an overly significant amount of foam on there. You want a little bit ahead, right?
Just enough to get on my mustache while we're talking.
There you go. There, I won't tell anyone anything that's on there. I'm drinking a Supper Club. I'm not having a fish fry today, but I would really like to because it goes really well with this beer. And it's a great sort of end of season entering into fall beer. So
it's like a good Pilsner.
Yeah. Right. Cheers, man.
Cheers.
All right, so CX versus UX. CX versus UX. Two acronyms. They're not TLAs. Well, I guess they're two-letter acronyms, right? Tell me about what that means. Like, I think I understand what UX means, but I don't know if everyone knows what CX means.
So I'm really excited to talk about this because, as you said, CX is a little bit mysterious, and the definition of CX is consumer experience. But also what we hear is customer experience. So we hear both of those terms, and we use those terms almost synonymously. The industry definition for customer experience has consumer experience in it, and vice versa. And what's interesting, if you tackle it from the idea of customer experience, we think of being a customer of a brand, we think of being, almost a consumer ends up being in that definition. When we think of consumer experience, we think of a consumption, right? But in both cases, we almost think of buying something. We think of being purchasing, our purchasing experience. But from a consumption standpoint, it becomes a little bit easier to digest. We're consuming a service, a product, a brand. And so when we think of customer experience versus user experience, what's really interesting about user experience is it's pertaining to the interface. When we think of user experience, I'm a user of an interface. When we think of customer experience, it really starts to talk about the totality of all of the communications, the multi-channels of interacting with a product, brand, or service. So that's my long-winded answer.
No, that's helpful. User experience seems to me to be like the microcosm of the app, or the thing that I'm interacting with, right? But customer experience to me feels like the journey. It's the entire relationship journey that I'm placing my customer on, from who do they talk to, about what, through what, when, and what am I trying to bring them to? Would that be a correct way to understand it?
Absolutely, and which is one of the reasons why it takes such a broad strategy to tackle customer experience, because we live in an era where technology is so ubiquitous that what that also does is it gives so many, we hear on a marketing perspective the multi-channel marketing, and this idea of there's multiple channels of communication, and user experience really operates in the universe of each one of those touch points. So let's say there's an email that goes out, or there's a chat bot on a website, or a website itself. Each one of those channels is a channel of communication that user experience works inside of.
It probably goes all the way to a conversation of how a company defines itself. If you think about a company like, let's just take Netflix that everybody knows, right? Like, if they had defined themselves as a DVD delivery company versus a experience company, a entertainment, a knowledge company, right? A media company, then their customer experience and their UX would be pretty similar, right? It would be, how do I best order a DVD and get it in the mail and deliver it back, right? But because they weren't afraid to think of themselves as a content company, a media company, their journey was inclusive of a lot of different ways to receive content.
That's a good way to put
And
it.
that seems to me like a way that we can see the journey of any organization, knowing who they are and how they deliver. Would that be fair?
Absolutely. I mean, just the idea that they controlled their messaging enough to let the customer experience or the communication moments known to their consumers, that they were both a DVD company, but that they were also online and that they streamed services. That was what made them so powerful. And Netflix, they're kind of an enigma in that what they did also was they really they also got a little lucky too, because they were at a time when you had the Blockbusters of the world, where that mode of mail-in or going into a store to buy something was just old. You had that analogy of the stone wheel, the square wheel versus the round wheel. Everybody caught on to this idea at once, and people were like, you know what, I'm not going to mail my DVDs in, or I'm not going to go down to the store anymore, I'm going to just stream it.
You know what's funny about that analogy is I think Blockbuster is like the guy with the stone wheel who's like, you know what, we got this, we're fine. Don't worry, I'm too busy to innovate, I'm cool, just see you later.
Yeah, and that really, the Netflix enigma, we attached ourselves to that brand, and we were. It was almost like we had a void to fill, where we realized that the Blockbusters of the world were antiquated, but that we wanted to fill that brand with something else. We filled it with Netflix, and then at the same time they pulled us in with their services, product, and brand.
Yeah, what's interesting about it is and maybe this is. I even had a misunderstanding, and maybe this is their fault, actually, that I had this misunderstanding and then they had to convert it, was that I thought of them initially as another way to get movies. And I was actually really upset about how I couldn't stream movies. I had to get them on DVD. Like
some of them, the ones that you wanted.
The ones I actually wanted,
Right.
They weren't on the streaming engine. And that's when I realized, their strategy wasn't to be a movie, the best way to get the movie I would have alternatively gotten to Blockbuster. It is a content company, and I want to go them for certain types of content.
Right.
And that shift for them has been very successful, even though I wasn't happy about them having a movie I wanted.
Right. Well, I think you touch on sort of the ecosystem, or the sort of that sort of concentric circles, if you will, of what's outside of the customer experience. And we talked about it a little bit, that sort of brand idea, that what contains the sort of customer experience is the brand. And what's interesting about the Netflix and the HBOs of the world is what ends up happening is we attach ourselves to the shows that they send out. Like Stranger Things was, that made Netflix. It's interesting that the logo of Stranger Things was red, and the branding for Netflix is red.
That
too,
is interesting,
right?
isn't it? No, it's not an accident.
Right, yeah, not an accident. But we attach ourselves to the brand, and like you said, maybe the act of having to order a DVD was something that was a little bit of friction with the customer experience, but you didn't mind. You were like, well, okay, Stranger Things is cool, I guess Netflix is cool, I'll deal with it, and that, I think that speaks to those sort of communication channels.
Interesting. When you think about the relationship between customer experience, consumer experience, and marketing, what is that relationship? Seems like you're almost getting into the marketing, digital agency, presentation of the world kind of space, but not quite. It's a slightly different concept than just marketing who you are.
Right. I think, and this is really where that sort of comprehensive strategy of CX and UX really comes to the forefront, because we realize that if we focus on, a lot of times we'll get projects, or we'll have maybe something where we're developing a strategy that is focused on UX. What we realize, though, is that, let's say we build a really great interface, or we have a really great user experience in an application, a web app, or something like that. But let's say the communication points, or the touch points outside of that application aren't up to par, or maybe they're disjointed. It lessens the impact of the UX piece of it. And then when we look outside of that realm and we look into the customer experience, areas where, let's say there's an email or a chatbot or a website or a commercial or a radio spot. Now we're getting really, we can talk about traditional marketing, but the brand is what sews, a brand platform is what sews those customer experience moments together because it unifies them with visual language or branding.
One of the things that I was thinking about as you're talking that hits CX home for me, and it's beyond like a look and feel, is Starbucks. And this is very recent, where I'm walking into Starbucks and I see all these people coming in the door that are just picking up their drink, but they weren't there to order it because they ordered it on the app or online. So this whole idea of ordering their Starbucks, walking up, getting it, leaving, is a total change in the customer experience of getting their drink. And it's aligned to their busy lifestyle or how they most desire to achieve it. And it's side by side with walking up and talking to the nice person who takes my order. And you can have social commentary about whether that's good or bad. But at the end of the day, it's a customer experience change, and it's a technology that's powering it. And there's something about that technology that makes them love using it and desire to use that versus walking up to the desk. But it's more than just a UX. It's about the whole story.
This is why I love talking about this stuff. And this is our second Beer 30.
Boom.
I love
Actually,
this.
third if you count the one we do with Marie.
That's true. So third Beer 30. But I think you just hit it on the head. I think what is really the strategy for CX and UX is building that trust, building that level of dynamic communication between the consumer or customer that, in the analogy that you're making where I ordered something online, I don't even get a chance to see a smiling face. I just come in and I'm like, thank you, and I leave.
See you later, right?
But because I built up that level of trust with Starbucks, I'm willing to take that chance with them. Like I'm able to have maybe something that might be a little bit sterile of an interaction with the brand, but because I've already built up that trust, I've been smiled at a few times already. Somebody wrote my name on a cup in a funny way or something, and that was my past experience. I built up that layer of trust, and now I'm able to order something online where I don't have any human interaction at all. That speaks volumes about CX.
What's interesting about that is I think it'll be fascinating to see how far they do go in that space, right? Because you could theoretically use your smartphone to order a super nitro macchiato from a vending machine, right? And there's no person involved. But you're missing something, aren't you? Like you're missing a personal interaction. And I'm not sure that's what they're going for either, necessarily, in all use cases. Versus if you went to a collectivo, like it's a little bit more of a restaurant-y kind of,
You might have to sit in line.
Yeah, you might have to sit in line a little bit, but there's some different things about that, less techy, more interactive, and I think it's going to be interesting how their customer experience, they decide who they want to be.
Right.
And it goes back to the main question of like, who do I want to be as a business? How am I trying to engage my customers? And what's the story?
Yeah.
So you end up being a storyteller about what their business is going to look like.
I think that idea of, the technology, the mixture of being a storyteller in this digital age, really one of the benefits that we have over traditional media is, if you hung a poster up in a coffee shop, there was no way to track it. There was no way to track that experience aside from, making speculations with that poster worked last time. Mm-hmm. We got a really good turnout for something, and that was used as the metric. But in this case, we can track all the orders from that mobile app. We can track, potential revenue. There's a host of different metrics that we could track that would eventually tell Starbucks how to pivot on that different customer experience. Hey, this is working out great. They don't need a smiling face, or we still need a touch point here in order to drive this home or drive sales. So.
Yeah, deciding the nature of what that is, right? It's interesting. You mentioned trust as a component of this. I saw Carvana. Have you seen Carvana yet? So I saw this driving. This is like car on on a trailer, and it's like an online buying of your car, and it's like, who would trust? Because we've all got parents, right? They want to go, make sure you go look under the hood and kick the tires and validate the thing. And I'm not a car guy, I can open up the hood and I don't really know what I'm looking at. And it's like, all right, great. Yeah,
I can change wiper blades.
Yeah, that's about it. I don't even know if I can do that. And on my last car, I literally bought over the internet, and they drove it up to me from Indiana, and it was great. And this Carvana thing really struck a chord, because it was like, customer experience turned on its head. Eliminate the horrible buying experience of going to the car place and haggling with the guy and dealing with all that, and order it on the internet and have it show up. It's like, even a
so
trust
they drive
level,
it to your house.
Yeah, like even a trust level of something like that.
Yeah.
Talk about disruption.
Yeah.
It's interesting how this story of technology is so much about the story of every company.
Yeah. Now I'm going to check this out after this meeting, but I'm assuming, and again, assumption is everything, right? But and nothing all at the same time. But I'm assuming that Carvana has really great branding, right? The idea that there's something about that brand that caused you to say, I actually could order.
It was. It was great UX and marketing. It was like, I saw it. I was like, hey, like when I buy my next car, whenever the heck that's going to be, I'm probably going to do that. Like, I don't really want to go to a store and go get it. Just do that. Simple, right? So super interesting.
Yeah, it was really interesting.
What a fascinating time to be in technology.
Exactly.
So what? Last question. What makes you love the idea of engaging in not just UX but in CX with customers?
So I think what makes me get up in the morning and love to go to work is the continual change. I think exactly what we were talking about, this whole conversation about how, because of technology, because of communication points, it's becoming an ever-changing, always dynamic, multi-channel customer experience. I mean, Microsoft Teams is a good example. Chatbots is a great example. Artificial intelligence is a great example where, here we have a machine interacting with us, but yet we still have to build a user experience around it that, in a way, even though we make it dynamic, it's still pretty static compared to artificial intelligence, where it's adapting around the UX that we're building. I think that is what drives me to want to keep doing this. I think it's so exciting.
Awesome. Thanks, Damon.
Yeah,
Cheers.
thank you.
Awesome
Cheers.
conversation. And we will see you next time on Concurrency Beer 30.